Hopefully that's not the case. This is Owen Waygood. I am a professor in transportation engineering at Polytechnique Montréal in Montreal, Canada. And this is a presentation that I've put together, which includes research from a project that I've done with Kevin Manot of McGill University, Geneviève Boisjoli, also of Polytechnique Montréal, the IPATH Center of the Texas A&M Transportation Institute, and then Yilin Sun, who's of the Zhejiang University in China, and Bobing Wang, who is a postdoc with me at Polytechnique Montréal. And there's simply the order of those authors is basically as they join the project. Right. So where did this come from? Well, obviously, COVID-19 is an exceptional situation, and it's had major impacts on how we have how we socialize with each other. And it's almost like this idea that with the lockdown, like the world is canceled. You're not supposed to do anything. You're not supposed to go anywhere. And so there's like these aspects that change our lives. So we can't. We're not supposed to leave where we live. For teachers and others, change from teaching in a classroom to teaching online, and all of us had to kind of scramble to try and figure out how to do that. The picture there is just me using a ladder on my laptop to basically film a whiteboard that I bought at a dollar store and trying to basically continue things as normal, even though they weren't. So when this shut down, when there's kind of this lockdown, things get essentially canceled. We're not can't really do anything. So a lot of us were initially okay. Well, is this kind of like a mini holiday that we get right now? Not supposed to go out, can't really do much, and maybe a lot of people increased their screen time. So whether that's a celebration of Netflix binge time to catch up on all those shows that I'd wanted to. So that was one possible approach. Another aspect is that you're locked down in your residence, but that's locked down with who? Are you alone? Do you have roommates? Is it with your family? And that's going to change your experience of that lockdown, and then obviously the dynamics that you have with those individuals is going to change those experiences. So for anecdotally, a lot of people talked about how you couldn't do as much, but it did end up allowing them maybe to get closer to their family. But again, it depends possibly also on the age of those children, who that family was. So you're locked up with the same people all the time. You will probably want to have some social interaction with others. A lot of us connected with our family who we don't live with, so those outside. There were connecting to friends, either the friends that you regularly contact with, or perhaps friends that you haven't had contact with in quite a while. Friends who live maybe in distant locations. Some of us may have continued to have contact with our colleagues, and in many cases, colleagues are also friends. And then there's your community. So maybe there's kind of people that you would run into on a regular basis, at the shops or on the streets, but that doesn't necessarily occur if you're not really supposed to leave the house. But perhaps even just walking around the block or something might still allow you to have those interactions at a distance. All right, so kind of had this we did have this aspect, if you will, it's like Zoomified, so our life on the internet. And so I just kind of grabbed a couple of photos here, kind of screenshots. It's like that Zoom call with the family, and I think a lot of people will have experienced that aspect that it's never really perfect. It's hard. It's like, oh, who's talking? Do I need to be quiet? You can't talk at the same time. So there's like that kind of odd negotiation of who's talking and when. It might have had. So one of our colleagues, Cynthia Chen. So she kind of organized this reunion, you will, of students who had all graduated from under the same supervisor, and were all distributed around the world. But yeah, we did have those opportunities to kind of reconnect with people that maybe we don't normally have that chance to. So all of this kind of gets back to that whole social interactions that we do crave, that we do want to have, but that limitation of not being able to go out did change the way that we could have social interactions. And these social interactions are an important aspect of managing our mental health. And social relationships that we have are actually quite important for our health overall. That a systematic review did find that it actually has quite a large impact on our mortality, in line with tobacco. And really, a lot of people realize, I think a lot of people realize this before, but I think it became even more evident to the, if you will, the general population, is that this need to belong, to socially interact with others, to have these contact with people are really a basic human need, and that without being allowed to maybe travel and to go and connect with people, that can have negative impacts on how we feel at those times. So we're not the only ones looking at this. Other people look at this, and Statistics Canada had quite a number of surveys that they were kind of rolling out. And so in May, they found that roughly 1/3 of Canadians had not had contacts with someone outside their household in the past week. Right, so then there's this whole aspect of people, not necessarily having contact, but then also at the same time recognizing that we're all kind of in that same situation, that people were trying to make connections with people however they could. So during this kind of period, so we started kind of thinking like, okay, how could we look at this? Like, what is the relationship with transport, and how is it changing? So obviously, this is something that we needed to develop in a timely manner. There wasn't the ability to go and get funding, so it was really a crowdsourced survey. The survey with the questions, depending on your context, it could take 15 to 20 minutes on average, and we conducted this in the month of May in 2020, so this year. And the questions about transport, and the whole aspect of, okay, how did you travel before? How are you traveling now? So looking at those changes, and then also looking at, okay, in your last trip outside of the house, so asking a number of questions like about how, like, what was done and how that felt. And then one of the interesting things that we were able to ask from an academic perspective is, this fact that we usually think of transport as a drive-demanded transport. It's just a means to an end, but it can be something we miss. Like, we don't necessarily, well, some people may like it, but to stay always at home, and that this loss of travel to places, and that travel itself may be something we miss. For social aspects, so there's there's these community interactions that could happen still. There's personal interactions that you would have if you went possibly on trips, and then obviously the substitution of using information communication technologies, and then the satisfaction that you have with that. And then from the mental health perspective, looking at life satisfaction, so before and then during that COVID period. So we had initially 881 valid responses, and those are mostly from the Montreal area. As I said, it's crowdsourced, so the university sent out invitations. Universities involved sent out invitations, and then it went out on media within the Montreal area, and then it was distributed also globally in the United States, and then also a bit later in July in China. So this was that, if you will, because that was after really China had to some extent gotten rid of COVID. So people were back to normal in that context. So it was retrospective, and we're not going to present it today just because we're still getting into that data. So some social interaction results. So with this we have so one of the first results is the satisfaction with social interaction. So I asked people before, what was their general social satisfaction with social interaction, and then to after. So we see it went from 70, which is pretty good. It's like a C minus, and then but it dropped down to 40, which is a failing grade. And so you see that really people, really, were quite aware of this change in their social interactions. That there are certainly individuals I heard from that talked about reaching out to friends that they hadn't heard from in so long, and so that was like a positive. But perhaps when maybe for those people it might have been positive, but from a maybe larger perspective, they realize, okay, that's maybe not really compensating for these other losses that I'm having. So the satisfaction with the substitution to ICT. So as we're using today's Zoom, it's great that it allows us some form of interaction and the ability to see people and not just their voice but their facial expressions. But it's still not the same as being in the same place with somebody. Not having to kind of figure out that game of adjusting when you talk and such like that with technology. Right, so the satisfaction with that change was 38 out of 100, so quite low. And women were generally less satisfied than men, and then people statistically less satisfied, and then people aged. Interesting enough, the kind of younger, so the 18 to 29 were less satisfied than the 40 to 59-year-olds. So despite what people might think about, the young people really being online and engaged online, they were less satisfied than those in my age group. And it might simply, it's the fact that young people really do want to get out and they want to be with other young people and do things together and have experiences. Well, that's maybe not quite the same. I don't know, maybe I have somebody in my age group might not have that same drive and desire to do those things because we have done them and we have we're at a different point in our lives. Okay, so we asked people also, what kind of interactions did they observe in their community, and we can see here that like waving to others was very common, and then chatting at 2 meters also very common, and then chatting at less than 2 meters. There we see a stepped reduction of that really it's just a few people and some people and then many. So but the portion of many is quite low, and then getting to gather as normal, it's even smaller. So people, if you will, people are aware that for the most part, people, they observe their neighbors as respecting that kind of hopefully temporary new normal. What do we miss? So we had questions here. So the whole, obviously, like physical contact was something that people missed. Just being able to give somebody a hug, and then really having chatting with friends was then the most common, followed by family, colleagues, general public, and neighbors. Neighbors was the least, and what part of that might be is that really in the context where you can't really go anywhere, you can still step outside and maybe you just kind of have those conversations with neighbors, so you're not necessarily missing it because it's still happening. So that's probably, at least that would be my interpretation of that. But locked in the house, trying to have these conversations online, you also have this desire to just kind of get out, right? So as you can see in the context of Montreal, in this, when we could get out, it's a city on a major river, so we could get out down to water. Luckily for us, it was just a couple minutes walk, or we go for bike rides. And then my kids, even though it's quite clearly still cold out, they would get various gear on and make themselves a little tea party and just head outside, just to be outside, even though maybe it's less comfortable, but just kind of get outside and be in that sun. We had actually just moved 1 week before, so that added some extra dimensions to the fun of lockdown. So trips that people missed. So in here we can see again like that on the far left. So I've organized these basically from what you missed the most on the left down to the least on the right. And friends and restaurants, going to restaurants. And going to restaurants is really generally a social activity. You often maybe plan to go with friends, and to also have that atmosphere of other people around you, and just that noise and of being in a restaurant. It's maybe not as interesting to go to a restaurant if you're the only one there. And then the other part is we get into this missing, going out to nature and going out, to water destinations with water. Coffee, again, can be seen as a social activity. Shopping, often something you do with your friends, possibly your family, and even work falls in here. Large parks. So maybe large parks didn't miss them as much, maybe because, again, on a local level, maybe you're still able to get out to them, so it's not something that you're necessarily missing depending on the context that you live in. And then we have worship, takeout. Takeout is often kind of still allowed, but some people may have worried about that. Groceries and pharmacy. So groceries and pharmacy are kind of some things that you're kind of still doing. And maybe nobody ever is going to the pharmacy to begin with, but so you can really see how a lot of the places that we're missing are related to social. Even work, there's an aspect that you go to work and you socialize with your colleagues, and there was anecdotally these comments that I've heard about people saying, I realize I don't actually like my work. I like my colleagues, but I don't like my work. So you can see some of that coming out here. So transport and social interactions. So one of the things, just wanting to get out of the house, it's just to walk to the shops was a desire that probably some people had. And the whole aspect of, in order to have physical present social interaction, as into face-to-face, one person does need to travel. However, we're told to stay at home as much as possible, right? So there's that, as we said, social interactions went online. At the same time, though, at least in Canada, it was recommended that you go for a walk as a means to kind of maintain your health. And one part is physical health, just simply moving, but also, and possibly more so, is the mental health aspect, that just getting out, breathing, and looking at whatever it is around you. So that was something that we were interested in. And again, so Statistics Canada had found that at the end of March, nearly a quarter of Canadians reported poor to fair mental health. So in the previous year, at the same time, it had been just 8%, and then this has gone up to 1 in 4. And then physical health, was actually reported as being better than 2018. And there's a small caveat to that. In 2018, it was a planned survey that was structured and went out to get like representative parts of the population, whereas in 2019 it was this crowdsourced survey, so the people who are responding are not necessarily exactly the same. And then, of course, social interactions can occur during travel. So you can have somebody that you travel with, and then there's the aspect of just running into somebody. They didn't anticipate this kind of what I would call this incidental social interaction. So I don't know if everyone knows what a mashup is, but it's kind of when you take two songs and you put them together. And so it's almost this, for me, is in these social interaction parts, it's kind of come together right now because everyone kind of had the desire to help each other, and people wanted to come together, but at the same time, it's not like "Don't stand so close to me" by the police. So it's like this picture on the far left is my son, who just happened to run into. We had to go to a neighborhood we had moved from, and he was telling me how wouldn't it be awesome if I ran into Elliot, my best friend, and he did. He ran into him on the street. But of course, the two of them are like, these are like 7-year-olds, but they're, we really gotta maintain distance. And it was funny watching that interaction, how they were still respecting that. But you could see themselves holding back, wanting to give each other a hug, but in the context, I didn't say anything. They just respected that themselves. And then there's on the CBC News, they went around and they found people who basically kind of set up these lawn chairs in their driveways and would respect the 2 meters and have these chats with others. And so you see these different ways that people were trying to manage these things. So one of the things that we asked people about, the last time you went out of the house, what did you like? How did you travel? What did you do? Did you see anyone? And these kind of things. So what we found was that if you went out alone, so this was linked to for the trip, increased levels of stress, boredom, being sad, and just overall less satisfied with that trip. And then what about who you went with? So here we had a number of different people that you could go out with, but we didn't find that this had any effect on the stress calm dichotomy. However, going on a trip out of the house with a friend from a distant household had the largest increase for that trip. People feeling it was exciting, that they were happy with it, and that they were satisfied. If it's just another adult in the household, also was associated with an increase in happiness and satisfaction. These are compared to being alone. And then if it's a trip outside the house with a child, an increase in happy and borderline, whether it was statistically significant for increasing satisfaction. So so then in terms of the mode you're using, so compared to walking, so it was our reference. So biking was the biggest increase for being calm, excitement, being happy, and satisfaction. Whereas driving, compared to walking, increased stress, increased boredom, increased being sad, and people were less satisfied. So that's kind of in line with research that had gone on before COVID, that active modes are more associated with positive, really positive experiences while traveling. So an aspect of running into someone. So in the context of COVID, this is a bit different than in the context of normal life. That maybe normal life, it's great to run into a friend or somebody while you're out. Context of COVID, it might be a little stressful. It's like, do you want to have those conversations? Maybe previously before, maybe you're someone who just strikes up the conversations with whoever you run into in the street. But then context of COVID, is like, is this allowed? So there's those different ways that things could react. Yeah, so I just kind of say it's like uplifting. It could be uplifting, it could be stressful. So what we did find was that if you didn't see anyone, so you went out but there was nobody else about, and I threw that in a boot just to make sure you knew I was Canadian. So you didn't see anyone. That was associated with increased boredom, being sad, and then decreased satisfaction. Then if you saw someone but you saw someone or some people, but you didn't have any interaction, that was kind of associated to increased stress, boredom, and being sad. So that could kind of relate to what I was saying, that you're seeing people but you're not wanting to interact with them, and that kind of might have created stress, as we see here. And then if you saw some people and you chatted with them, this is associated with an increase in excitement and happiness. So we do see that those aspects are potentially improving people's lives. And then just so there's no measurable contact if you're just simply waving or saying simply hi. Really did seem, for a measurable impact, it seemed that you needed to chat with those people. Another part is, as I said, these things that people miss is seeking out nature, that wanting to go to these green and blue spaces. So we as a family did we went on a bike trip, luckily in Montreal, that we could bike to a campground, and this is took us hours on a bike with small kids, but it's within Montreal, so that was really nice that we were able to do that. So this whole aspect, and it's not just, I don't think, our family, people really, I know it's not. It's people seeking out these green spaces, blue spaces meaning like space with water. And so there's evidence that going like forest bathing, so which is, it comes from the Japanese cultural term for basically immersing yourself in green, and it's found in reviews to help with techno stress, and then other reviews talk about the restorative benefits just related to going into green areas, and also reducing attentional fatigue. And attentional fatigue is probably something, really like the Zoom fatigue that we get because you're having to focus on the screen is elevated. We don't blink as much, things like this. So there's a positive relationship between life satisfaction during COVID and frequency. So this is our study. So what we found is if you were frequently going to large parks, to destinations that had water, nature destinations, which large parks meaning something that's much more manicured, if you will, a local place where nature we also included, included linear parks. Linear park would be like more natural spaces along a riverbank, something like that. There's a problem there with my and then meeting friends, animation problems. Right. Okay. So what are the main takeaways? So making excursions with someone leads to more trip satisfaction, and then doing that with somebody from a different household, as a friend, increases even more. And I should say, in the context of Montreal, currently we've been upgraded to red zone, so we're a COVID hotspot, and the government has basically said stop having social interactions unless you live alone. If you live alone, you can have one person in your bubble, if you will. But if you're a family such as ours, this is it for social interaction for a month. we're back into basically back into lockdown. Active modes seem to give more positive feelings than the passive modes. And you're better off if you had some social interactions, so whether it be by telephone, Zoom, etc. So even though people aren't necessarily satisfied with that, if we analyze life satisfaction, having social interaction and being satisfied with that maintained better life satisfaction. So as far as possible, try not to be too frustrated with what the situation is, and apparently you'll be more satisfied in life. And then better off if you got into green and blue spaces such as parks. So so really there's this idea of just getting out, taking that time away from these screens, getting out, taking moments to for the restorative nature of nature. It's a bad sentence, but so things that we're going to try and look at is this aspect of it was kind of, at least in Montreal, is a reconfiguration of street space and how it is used. So on a lot of the commercial streets in Montreal, they shut it down to traffic. So it went from just Google image from the previous year. So you have a few cars traveling down the road to generally being quite busy with people shopping and just enjoying that space. Like just it's getting outside and just seeing people. Right. So recently we fortunately got some funding from our national funding agency in Canada. So just to mention that, and that will allow us to go a bit more into the research and to the data, and possibly look at running another survey in the near future, possibly in this second lockdown, to see how people are adjusting and if they've kind of learned from the first wave how to kind of manage. The first wave is such a shock that it probably had a large impact, and maybe people have found ways to kind of manage some of that. So thank you, and please ask questions, give me some comments, and hopefully I'll be able to share some more with you, and possibly even gain from your knowledge. Thank you.